Hello and welcome to another episode of my science mode playthrough of Kerbal Space Program in the Je Nais Se Quoi planet pack. Today I will be sending probes to Duna and Lindor's moon Huygen. Duna is the Kerbal equivalent to the real solar system's Mars, and this holds true in Je Nais Se Quoi. Lindor is a Uranus-like gas giant beyond the orbit of Joule, and Huygen is a moon of it which is reminiscent of Saturn's moon Titan with its low gravity and thick atmosphere. The first mission is Ares-2, which is a mapping satellite that will scan the surface of Duna for biomes, anomalies, and resources. Ares-2 is launching off of an Athena Intermediate B, which is the lighter of two launch vehicles derived from the Athena Super Heavy and is just the core and fourth stage of that rocket. Once Ares-2 has sent itself off on its way to Duna, Ares-3 is launched. This rover will be used to get data from a variety of biomes and surface features on Duna. Ares-3 is also launching off of an Athena Intermediate B. During the time between the Lindor transfer window and the arrivals of the Ares probes to Duna, research is done on Athens Station in orbit around Minmus. Nearing its Duna encounter, Ares-2 does a mid-course correction to ensure it can get into the polar orbit necessary for mapping the surface. While the two Duna missions were coasting to their target, a transfer window to Lindor opened, and so I sent a probe out that way. The Prospector 1 probe is a nuclear-powered unmanned spacecraft that will take scans of Huygen and send two probes down to the surface. I realize using what's basically an Athena Super Heavy with a nuclear 4th stage may be overkill, but I didn't want to mess with a bunch of gravity assists, so I did this instead. Once out of the atmosphere, Prospector 1 ditches the protective fairing that was covering its scanning equipment and the 2 smaller probes, and begins its burns to put it on a Lindor encounter. Meanwhile, Ares 2 is doing its burn to insert itself into a polar orbit around Duna and begin scanning the surface for all that can be found. Back to Prospector 1, here we can see the mid-course correction burn it had to do to set up a Huygen encounter. Prospector 1 did a burn to insert itself into orbit around Huygen and then did some adjustments to its orbit to be able to scan the surface. It then decoupled its probes to go down to the surface, but the alarm for Ares 3's Duna encounter went off, so I had to switch to that mission. After doing some burns to lower the periapsis of its flyby, Ares 3 does one final burn to put itself into a low orbit around Duna. Once in position, the rover and its sky crane detach from the transfer stage and go down to the surface, while the stage left in orbit will act as a relay to bounce signals to the rover until it is landed and safe to deploy its own antenna that can be used to directly communicate with the KSC. The rover started to flip once it entered the atmosphere. Deploying the parachute mitigated the problem to an extent, but not a great one. Future rovers will either have ballast of some sort, more powerful reaction wheels, or some other addition to prevent flipping. Due to problems caused by the rover wanting to tumble during its descent, I wasn't able to lower its horizontal velocity enough to be safe for landing. This led to one of the rover's wheels being overstressed and exploding, which then caused the rover to flip some more after hitting the ground. Luckily, I decoupled from the sky crane in time for the rover to land on its remaining wheels, and it surprisingly was able to drive around. However, the antenna that was meant to allow direct communication with the Space Center was damaged during the glorified crash that we will refer to as a landing, so the rover will have to have line of sight with a relay if I want to do anything. After recovering from the landing, the rover took some readings from its surroundings before going up to a rock and using its scanning arm on it. If you have noticed the absence of solar panels on this rover, that is because I decided this thing would be nuclear powered. If you've watched the series up to this point, then you may have noticed I've become something of a nuclear junkie. This is only going to get worse as I unlock better reactors, especially after I unlock the fusion reactors, because why even bother with solar panels when something can be powered by its own personal sun? Once I got everything I could out of this biome, I just opened up the BonVoyage mod and gave this rover a waypoint to go to that is in a new biome. Back to the Huygen probes now. You can see the first one has done its little burn to deorbit and is now going through the atmosphere, which starts very high up. I don't even remember how high up it is, but it's high, and once it decoupled its little retro pack thingy, it just continued its descent. The reason I decided to ditch that thing is so it would have a flat surface to land on, because while it's not really necessary for it to land upright, it would be nice and would just look better if it does. Once on the surface, all of the experiments were ran, and my favorite would probably be the biodrill, because it says something about the presence of methane, which basically confirms that this is supposed to be an analog to Saturn's moon Titan, if its appearance didn't make that obvious, but yeah, that's just something I thought was cool. So, after the first probe did its experiments, the second probe deorbited and took readings from a biome on the opposite side of Huygen. I went ahead and just spared you the descent and everything, because it was just basically the same as the first one, so... yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect someone to watch the same thing twice, and I honestly wouldn't ask that you do. And so yeah, just different experiments, basically the same reports. The scans were really messed up for some reason, like it just wasn't working. I don't know if I had my orbit at the wrong altitude or what, but I'm gonna have to like fix that off camera, I guess. I guess that just about wraps this up. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like or dislike it if you didn't like it. If you have anything to say about this video at all, please consider leaving a comment. I am open to criticism and would like to know how to make these videos better. If you would like to hear about it every time I upload it, then please consider subscribing and enabling all notifications. That is all from me for now. Goodbye.